right, we're back. We keep getting interrupted, so we're going to try and finish this. And Buck thinks, and I think we were pretty much where they put the prop on backwards, the great government FAA trained inspector.
Yep. If the prop had been put on backwards, I'm going to ask you guys, okay, the engine only rotates in one direction. So which way would the air have been flowing? It would have been flowing forward. So the aircraft had to push the nose forward, take off, and look over my shoulder as we flew backwards. No, that probably did not happen. They cut the safety wires on these two bolts that are holding the clamshell assembly, and they put a torque wrench on at 50 pounds. It's supposed to be like 90 pounds of torque on those two things, and it spun right off. They backed it off to 35 pounds, put it on there, and it spun right off. So all they know is the one bolt was less than 50 and the other one was less than 35. It should have been 90. As what happened in flight, when I set 2100 RPM, is the prop changed pitch, and it changed from an angle, we'll say it was supposed to be 11 degrees, to almost a flat pitch, which is no degrees, which is and then it went into minus, say, 7 to 8 degrees, which is basically reverse pitch. Now, in fact, I have a picture of the Macaulay emblems on this prop in my Instamatic camera, and they are facing forward. At the crash site, the Macaulay emblems, the props was kind of folded back around the engine. The Macaulay emblems are facing the cylinder jugs. So the thing was 180 degrees out of sync. In effect, it was blowing air forward when I was flying, and causing the aircraft to have a huge amount of drag. Instead of having thrust, it had negative thrust. The aircraft pitched over. With this essentially 11-foot in diameter wall up here in front, it's like having a piece of plywood that big around, because it's turning 2800 RPM, blowing air the wrong direction. There's no airflow over the tail, so the aircraft couldn't change pitch.
And you couldn't tell your airspeed, so you didn't know you were losing airspeed.
Couldn't tell what the airspeed was. All I knew is I was still moving through the air, but I was in a 20-degree dive doing about 80 miles an hour. The airplane should have been flying, but there was no response when I pulled back on the pole. When I pulled back, the nose should have come up. It didn't. When I pushed forward on the nose, it should have gone down. It didn't, which is why I turned around to look at my friend like saying, "What the hell is wrong with your plane?" And
we forgot to say where he was.
He had
he didn't eject.
George part didn't eject. He didn't bail out. He didn't have a parachute either. But he thought perhaps we were losing power due to the carburetor heat coming on. The carburetor heat is located near your right ankle on that airplane. It's a 1940s design, 38 to 40s. It's not the most user-friendly. So he bent over to touch the carburetor heat. And when he did, that was just the time I looked back there and I could see the empty shoulder harnesses hanging down the seat. And I went, "Thank you."
Which didn't compute in your mind.
It computed. I said, "He's not here anymore." And he may have tried to come onto the stick, but man, I had enough adrenaline. I could outpower him 3 times out of Sunday. I bench pressed 500 pounds, boys and girls. So I can pull back on a pole. So I did. And it didn't do anything to help me out. Now, like I said, the tape and my mental memory of that stops about 15 feet in the air when I was in a bank around a 20-degree dive and about a 60-degree bank trying to fly in between these two buildings.
That's the last thing you remember?
It's the last thing I remember. Until I came to, for a short period of time, in the emergency room while they were stitching up my face. My face looked like someone smashed me right in my forehead with a sledgehammer. Crushed it. It broke my skull in, took my nose off, and I didn't look very good. So they were stitching my face up, and I could hear them talking. I could feel them pulling the stitches like that, but I was incapable of responding to them. Then I remember them cutting my shirt off. It was a nice shirt. and laying me down on a CAT scan machine. Well, it was probably 68 degrees in that room. I'd been outside and it's 98, so 68 was damn cold. And I laid on it and went, oh, well, that's cold. And they ran me through the CAT scan machine. I again went back into my coma, and I woke up 5 days later. I only woke up once during intensive care, and I'd been bleeding internally, and I got upset stomach and threw up. With my broken ribs, it didn't feel really good. And if you've ever had broken ribs and you have to throw up, it feels about like somebody has a sword in there, sticks in one side and out the other side, and a twist and says, "Does it hurt when I do this?" He goes, "I think so." By the way, so as it was, I woke up 5 days later and started talking to my wife. Said, "Where am I?" And she told me I was in Bethany Hospital in Wichita Falls. I said, "What am I doing here? You in a plane crash?" I was like, "What?" At that point, I had no recollection of it.
Oh, so you didn't even remember all the problems before?
I didn't remember anything.
Right.
I didn't remember having a plane crash because I hadn't had a plane crash. And then I remember going, yeah, I went with George and we went to pick up his plane and, oh yeah. But the crash itself, I do not recall. Now, why? Because my head injury was so intensive that it stops your brain from writing memories. It's just as if when you have anesthesia, you can be talking to someone perfectly normal, having a conversation while an anesthetic, general anesthetic is being applied, and you will continue to talk for 2 or 3 minutes until the anesthesia turns off your brain completely, but your memories will stop. The second that stuff gets your brain, you're not writing electrochemical memories in your brain. Now, what it turns out happened, the aircraft in this 60-degree bank or so and 20-degree dive somersaulted end over end and ended up right side up in the street across from the two houses that I had seen from the air, and had
stayed together.
Pretty much stayed together. Fuselage was intact. The tail was slightly twisted. The right wings were folded back. Wings, 2 of them. It's a biplane. Were folded back. The right gear was gone. It was back in between the houses. The engine was broken off and turned, I don't say 60 to 90 degrees left from its normal line, and it was sitting there smoking. Now George said, that he only got a hit a spinal compression and separated right shoulder. I had separated shoulder, spinal compression. I had the stick in my gut when I was pulling those G's, and it broke several ribs, broke my left hand, which is on the throttle, pushing it to the firewall, not helping out at all. And then my head hit the glare shield. It's a metal tube which extends from one side of the fuselage to the other and has a piece of sheet metal on top. It provides shade for your instruments. You have one in your car too. You just never pay attention to it. It's behind the steering wheel. There's a glare shield over there to keep the sun from shining on your instruments, because you can't see them when the sun bounces off of them like a mirror, and you go, well, I can't see my speed. I can't see my oil. So that's just what.
So why do you think you got much more damage than him?
Probably due to difference in body mass. I weighed 200 and he made 175 or so. It might have been part of it. It could have just been the difference in how tight our shoulder harnesses were. Now, what my theory from an engineering standpoint was my body plasticized. It's about a 20 G deceleration, which is a lot faster than you get when you eject. You eject and it's about an 11 G pump up your butt and kicks your butt, and it's painful. Thank you. Boom. You go up the rails, your face sags and your jaw drops and your eyelids drop.
You get dizzy and all the blood runs from your head, or
no. You can't see anything. Boom, 11 G's, you're black. Boom, and
no kidding.
Yeah, well, just like pulling G's, about 6.5 to 8 G's, unless you've got a G suit, compressing your lower extremities, all the blood in your femoral arteries and the venous. And your abdominal area, it keeps it from the blood from going from your heart, lungs, brain, neck, and everything else down into your toes at 8 G's. So
that's 8, and so when you eject, you're at 11.
You're going boom. You're coming out of there, boom. But we hit with probably 20 because our feet broke the bottom of the airplane. Broke the floor out. Now, when I did so, it also caused my spine to compress, get lower. Most people, when they eject, they lose about a half an inch in height. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's not, depending on how bad the disc in the spine are damaged.
You mean they permanently lose it?
You can permanently lose. Yeah, it's not fun.
Wow.
It's a save your ass, or would you rather be dead or would you rather be half an inch shorter? Let me think about that for a while. Can I get back to you? So it's a major deal. Though I've had several friends that ejected.
Wow.
And
I
I've
didn't
just
think
done
it was that traumatic.
I've just done it in practice. Well, in the old Air Force seats in T-37, they used a 37 millimeter cannon round, stick in a tube underneath the seat, and boom, it'd blow you on up the rail 25, 30 feet.
Oh,
You
shit.
only weigh 200 pounds. Imagine getting blown 30 feet in the air. How much pressure does it take to do that? A lot. 30. Got just a second. Bring back up.
Buckster.
This is a World War I artillery shell. Everybody keeps one laying around. This is what's called French trench art, but that's like a 37 millimeter round. And you take this off and you put your rejection seat on there and
Oh shit!
blow your butt up to you.
Holy
Yeah,
shit!
boom. Yeah.
So to get back to what we were talking about, when I was talking about fight or flight for cops, and the cops couldn't keep a straight thought, and I told you they were thinking faster, I looked up, and one of the stats was we process thoughts 3,000 times a minute versus talking 150 words a minute or 150 thoughts a minute. So Buck was saying that you went through all your.
I went through like 2 years of aeronautical engineering, astronautical engineering, a year of pilot training, and all the experiences I've had flying since I was 5 years old. You can recover, you go run through all that stuff in about 4 seconds. And people go, oh, well, that's not possible. I'll say, bullshit. You know, you haven't been in a situation where
Life or death,
it's life or
right.
death, where it depended upon you to think that fast. You can do
Yeah.
it if you have to.
Yeah, you said because you were like NASA training or physics. You went through all your schooling.
Yeah, I've got a science degree. Everybody that graduates from the Air Force Academy at that time gets a Bachelor of Science degree. You have computer science, physics, electrical engineering, chemicals, chemistry. You take all those. And even you want to be an English major? Great, you can be an English major. Let me tell you how about physics though. The Air Force wanted well-rounded people. They didn't want them just to be, well, I know about geology. Fine. You're going to know about geology, and you're going to know about aeronautical engineering, because you're an Air Force officer. You're not a geological officer. You're an Air Force officer.
Now, nobody's going to be able to understand that. But what do you mean you went through all your? You started critical thinking about options and lift, and you had a little note here. Where was that?
The little note.
Yeah.
This was a picture. This picture came into my head, or something like that. This is a really bad. I'm a terrible artist. I'm a great pilot, and I'm good at a lot of things, but hand drawing. This represents the 4 different vectors of energy that affect an aircraft. Now, there's thrust, lift, weight, and drag. And what happened in the situation with the steerman was the thrust not only went away, it wasn't taking me this direction. The thrust was added to the drag, and so the airplane goes boop, down like that. The gravity got a hold of me, and because I had no control of the flight controls at the back. See, if you block off the airflow over the tail, none of these surfaces work. Now that the ailerons are out here, and the aircraft can still roll, you just can't turn. People think they have the misconception. Airplanes don't turn like this. A turn is a climb to the right or a climb to the left. Now,
And when you said you put that plywood in front of you, it blocked all the wind to the.
it blocked off the wind to the empennage, which has the elevators and the rudder. If you don't have elevators, you can't change the pitch. You can't climb. You can't. You're just going down. I knew I was screwed basically whenever I went full aft. I could understand being stalled and not being able to climb. But when I went full forward on the stick and the aircraft didn't pitch forward, I said, we got a problem. I thought perhaps that I had a snapped elevator cable. They're just wire cables like that hook up to the stick, and they run through a series of belt cranks and pulleys, and if one of those suckers breaks, you're in for a bad day. I try to I'll compare it to a situation that you're driving down a mountain road, and there's a lot of cliffs, and you're right on the edge of a cliff. there's a cliff here and a cliff here, and you got this mountain road that's going down the side of the mountain. Okay, your steering wheel comes off in your hand just the time that the brakes go out. And the question is, is not, are you going to have an accident? The question is, how bad is the accident going to be? Are you just going to run to the side of the mountain and tear up the side of the truck and then come to a stop? Or are you going to go off the left side and go down? The answer is you don't know, because you're a passenger now. You're no longer in control of the airplane. The only thing you can do is roll. Let's see, let me get this thing out here. Is roll the aircraft. That doesn't change your direction. You're still going down. I was able to go in between the houses like this to keep from causing the fuselage to smack into the side of the building, and possibly cause that 65-gallon fuel tank to burst into flame.
But at no time when you were doing this did you say, shit, we're just screwed, I'll just sit here for the ride.
Negative.
Exactly.
Negative. My brain
you
was
stayed in a
working
fight. Yeah.
full time, and that's what a soldier's going to do in the battlefield. That's what we should do. The same thing as a sailor when he's fighting. The same thing with a cop. If it's one v many, suddenly a gang comes out and they start trying to wail on you and pound you into the mud. You better start thinking of something else. You can't call for help. That's not going to help you. You can start taking out knees, taking out crotches, taking out feet. Doing some things. If you got one hand moving, do this. Go for your backup gun if you have a backup gun, and start putting it in places where people, don't want to have a 380 ammo inserted.
So did at any point during the crash did you kind of say, you realize we're going to crash?
No,
because you were so concentrated on the task.
Concentrated on trying to
troubleshoot
to fly. I wasn't trying to solve the problem other than trying to keep from dying. That was my thing number one. And I really did believe that when I got to one half the wingspan of the aircraft, in other words, this high above the ground, you start picking up ground effect, and I thought it would possibly cushion the descent. Unfortunately, because I had to make the later decision to roll the aircraft, there is no ground effect.
Sure, you just got a little tip of the wing.
You're pushing the warm or the higher pressure air is going this direction. What little bit of lift, and you don't have much because the angle of attack was terrible, is going this direction. The aircraft's still going to go down. You can't stop it. Now, in retrospect, had I known that the aircraft had a ground adjustable fixed pitch prop, like I said, the manual said it has a fixed pitch prop. I didn't know that it could be changed. Had I known that, take the throttle back to idle, shut the engine off, stop providing negative thrust, and use God's gravity to glide down, climb over the houses, bank, roll out, land on the street, and go, what the heck was that?
Oh, so that was a preventable accident had you known.
That's correct. And that's what I tell people over and over again. Don't ever fall for the old saw. What you don't know, can't hurt you. What you don't know will bite you in the ass. Big time.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't even think of that. I was like, well, this kind of sounds like it's unpreventable. But had you known...
Had I known that the prop could change pitch and go into beta, which is reverse pitch. I've flown aircraft that had adjustable or had reversible props.
Okay. And had you been higher and had more time, would you think it would have clicked, or would it have went completely around, or would it just went straight down?
What's that?
The plane. If you were really high, it started diving.
It wouldn't have made any difference. The plane would have continued to drop at that angle as long as the engine was off. Or the engine was running. If the engine is off, I'd have flight controls. I could turn, I could do that, I could stall the airplane, get down and land in a tree at 40 miles an hour.
If you were high enough and you turned it upside down and continue to fall, would that have given a clue that I must have some forward? No?
No. You don't want to go upside down, because that, as it was, I was in a survivable rate of descent. We're maybe doing...
I thought you said 80.
Well, 80 miles an hour, but do the math. I'll have to do the math. It's probably around 2,000 feet per second. No, that's not right. Or per minute. That's right, 2,000 feet per minute. That is 15 seconds from 500 to the ground. Okay, you have to do the math. So 2,000 feet per minute is an ugly, ugly landing. Most aircraft or airliners come in at, we have a degree glide slope, and that's roughly 800 feet per minute until you flare. So this was already 2.5 times the normal rate of descent.
Yeah, you were dropping fast.
You're going to hit really, really hard and possibly flip over and a bunch of other things.
Which
Even if you land
decreases
on
your
the
time
wheels.
to troubleshoot or try to figure it out.
Yeah, well, when you've got 12 seconds, the first thing that happens is you try to figure out what's wrong. And if you don't have education in here to go back through and take care of that problem, you're not going to be able to fix it. I liken that to the incident. It was the forced landing, the ditching of the Airbus that one of my Academy fellows, he was class of 73, I'm class of 71, Sullenberger. And Sully lost 2 engines on his aircraft. Boom, boom, flew through a flock of geese, wiped out 2 engines on his Airbus. Now, his first thought was to get the engine restarted. He didn't want to go land in the water. He didn't want to ditch any place. So they spent 30 seconds trying to get the engine restarted. In a perfect world, he might have said, "Oh, I can glide over here to Teterboro and land." No, that wasn't what he's trying to do. He was trying to get the engines restarted, because if he got even one of the engines restarted, he wouldn't have to make an emergency landing anywhere. He'd be able to make a ditching anywhere. He'd be able to fly. So that was his first thing. Tried number 1, tried number 2. Now they're down to like 40 seconds from impact, and they realize they said, "Oh, hey, this ain't working." So we're going to have to do something that nobody else has ever done. We're going to have to put it out an air carrier. We're going to have to do a ditching in a jet. There have been some air carriers have landed inadvertently in the water, but they've even been hijacked, or the guys had made a screw up on an instrument approach and landed in the water thinking they were still in the air. That sort of thing. That's kind of bad juju, but we're getting a little far afield. But you have a hierarchy of events and hierarchy of things that you have to do. Aviate, navigate, and communicate. You don't have to basically talking to people on the radio does not help.
Sure.
I don't care. Yeah. And well, see, you have to keep the airplane flying. Don't go upside down. Don't go inverted and go into the ground at 800 knots. That's not survivable. Navigation. You have to be able to navigate, because if you get lost while you're saving the airplane, and you don't know where you are, you're in the weather. Okay, now you got another major problem, but you can fly into a mountain and do something else. People die like that. But communication is the third thing on the list. And I've had co-pilots when I was in an emergency trying to divert from my approach in the weather, and tell them, okay, by the way, gear up, let's go around. He got talking on the radio and asking for permission to do something. I went, "Hey, dude, I'm sitting there when the airplane's not flying, it's not climbing like the hell." I said, "Hey, well, shut up and raise a gear. Flap 15.
Yeah.
Go around, checklist. Do what I'm telling you to do. I don't care if the FAA knows where I am. I don't care. I'm not asking them permission."
Yeah, see, and that's almost different than a cop, because cops, you have to direct your thinking. I'm going to get help, and I'm going to get more officers here, and I need to get them here, so I got to get that out. And sometimes cops will talk on the radio because that's the most comfortable thing in a crisis. So they go back to the easiest and comfortable. Let me just do what,
Yeah, if the help is 3 minutes away and you're going to die in the next 15 seconds if you don't change something, you see where my point is. Your communication should not be your primary goal.
Right.
Officer needs assistance. Boom, say that and get on about doing whatever is necessary to do. But you don't need to be talking on the radio or have your hand on the mic or doing this kind of stuff when you got your pistol on somebody else. If the guy's a threat to you right now, hey,
deal with the threat.
Deal with the threat.
Sure.
Because we civilians often say, when seconds counts, the police are only minutes away.
Yep, ain't that the truth?
Sorry about that, guys, but that's the truth. You can't be everywhere for everybody at all times. Sometimes you're right behind a guy who does something stupid.
Yeah.
And you light him up. Hey, man, you're driving on the shoulder trying to get around that traffic, weren't you? You're cutting off in the ditch. You didn't look in the rearview mirror. So But how often does that happen? Once in a blue moon. So,
All right, but we're at 24 minutes. All right, we're going to end this one, and we're going to do another one on his other pretty cool thing where he went through this fight or flight adrenaline pump, processing tons of information in seconds. All right, we'll end that there. Thanks, Buck.